how to prioritize self-care in your life and what that looks like for you. Talk to me about your journey with that.
Well, my self-care was a bit bludgeoning initially. I anesthetized through sport, endurance sports specifically. So, and at one point triathlon. And while it kept me sane and it may have kept me on planet Earth, ultimately it was not self-care.
Yeah.
So I've had to learn. It was forced upon me. A persona was ripped away, and I've had to learn what authentic self-care is. And it's a priority because my goal when I wake up in the morning, I say, I want to experience heaven on earth today. And I find if I go for a little walk, if I just recognize my breath and that I'm breathing, if I realize I have 2 arms and legs and feet that are on the ground, I have a much different day ahead of me than if I jump out of bed and start 3 tasks at once to get it all done so I'm safe.
Oh, gosh. Yeah. Oh, boom. That safety word. I can resonate with this so much. And thank you for sharing that because I understand that journey. I used to run track. I ran half marathons in my 30s. And that was, I can relate to that. I released a lot of inner angst through doing that physical work. And that probably kept me from having any health issues until I got into later in my life, but I wasn't dealing with any of the emotional stuff. But I will give it credit for what it did, but I think I gave it too much credit. And I completely understand the safety thing. Like you get up in the morning and the way your brain works when you've come up in a very trauma-informed home growing up, where you're just waiting for the next thing to come and you're trying to be ready for it, that's how you wake up every morning. Your nervous system is trained to be like, okay, what do we got? What do I need to check to keep myself safe, to keep my people safe? And there's no reality about what safety is. Your nervous system just goes into go mode. And it took me years to identify that. How long did it take you to get there where you realized, ooh, I got to slow this down. I am actually safe?
Well, I knew in my 20s because the red flags showed up in my world early. I left my family home of origin the morning after high school graduation. And I didn't often go back. But I recognized in my early 20s, I was exhibiting some of the same behavior. I was using alcohol to anesthetize. I was using exercise. My relationships were getting more explosive. It was just as easy to lie as it was to tell the truth. And I felt fraudulent. And I knew I had to do something.
Yeah.
So
wow.
That's when I started that self-examination. That's when I first realized, oh yeah, there's a rat on the wheel here, but it would be decades later until I could work with that rat.
No, isn't that true? I mean, I went into therapy the first time in college. I went into therapy the second time in my early 30s, but it wasn't really till I went into therapy when I was 50 that I really got to the bones of it. So I can relate to that. It's interesting the way our mind works and how our body absorbs things. And when our brain gets to a point where we feel safe enough to deal with them. So I completely understand that.
I like how you touched right away, Melissa, on the body. Because for me, I did lots of talk therapy, and it was important for me to get a linear storyline and a storyline that came from my mind. But what was really important was to go into my body somatically and experience it at a cellular level and where it was trapped within my physical body. And working in that way has really created transformation and authentic change.
Talk to me about boundaries, because for me, when you grow up in a family setting that has that kind of unpredictability, boundaries aren't even, and I would say when we were growing up, that wasn't even a conversation. Like we didn't even know we were supposed to have them. And so talk to me about your journey with boundaries and what that has looked like for you.
So my boundaries were porous.
Yeah.
They were negligible, and I did not feel entitled to any type of boundary. I had no self-worth, and I knew how to live by serving others. So my being and my boundary was set aside in a little container elsewhere so I could just live. So I could survive. And boundaries, it's been a real interesting journey. When I first got sober, I learned no was a complete sentence.
Yeah.
And I was a mother fluffer with that word.
Oh my gosh. When you discover it becomes so empowering. And I think for me, I set boundaries and learned how to communicate. And I'm still working the communication part, but first you set them and you're like, boom. And you have to kind of relearn what that looks like. And okay, let's be adjustable. Let's be flexible with this. But yeah, when you don't know that is available to you and then you find it, it's very eye-opening and very revolutionary, but sometimes you got to go and then pull back a little bit. I know that's been my experience with that too. No is a powerful word when you feel empowered to use it. Taking care of our emotional health as much as our physical health. You talked about that somatic piece. I relate to this so heartily because we don't talk about this as women. We don't talk about this as people. We don't talk about this with our doctors, and unless we bring it up. That's what I have found. If I bring it up, and I just had my, annual physical last week, and it was the first time, and I think my doctor finally knows me well enough. I've been going to this office for about 3 years now, finally understands to ask me. I mean, I have an official anxiety diagnosis in my records. But knows enough to ask me what's been going on in your life, what's happening right now. And then that informs, what some of these things might look like, what my heart rate might look like, what my blood pressure might be, rather than just jumping to throwing me a prescription at me at that, having a conversation to determine, is this a situational thing or is this something that's an actual medical presence? But unless you are the one initiating those conversations, it's very hard to get that practice going to get the whole thing talked about and even recognize it yourself. So talk to me. You touched on it already, but talk more to me about that emotional and physical and mental health connection.
Well, like you said, the three all come together, but unless I have awareness, and it's a journey to find self-awareness and then to accept it. Because my reality was distorted, ridiculed, chided. The mind fluffing was almost never ending. And so it's been a journey for me to say, this is my belief and I'm okay having that. I'm not crazy.
Yeah.
My mother used to beat me and say, you're crazy. You're going to end up in an insane asylum. You're sick, emotionally ill. So when you have that repeated messaging and then you begin to repeat that yourself, it takes effort to untangle those threads, those strands, and tease them out, and then understand what physical health really is.
Yeah.
You have a headache? Oh, tough it out. You have a sore throat? Tough it out. Oh, you have strep throat? You'll make it. Oh, you have rheumatic fever? So sorry. We'll take you to the hospital now.
Wow. 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 And isn't that interesting though? Because I think it's so interesting too, when you grow up in an environment like that and you don't know anything else, you don't know that's not normal. It's not until you like kind of get out in the world a little bit or see how other households function or people function that you can even have the thought that, oh, maybe this isn't the way this is supposed to go. And your body knows that early on, but you're not taught to believe your body. You're not taught to believe or listen to anything about yourself because you've been fed all of these reasons that you shouldn't. And how you carry that within you. I know for me, it's so interesting how the body will carry that until you give it permission to release it. And, you talked about transitioning now where you getting out and having these walks and the awareness and the mindfulness. You cannot adjust or address something without the mindfulness. But then and I'll be interested to hear how you feel about this, but once you know it, you can't unknow it. Has that been your experience? Like you can't?
Oh my gosh. So much so. There's so many things I'd like to put back in the can and screw it on tight. But yeah, once it's out of the bag, it's pretty hard to go back. And it was the same in my marriage. I knew it was well beyond the expiration date, but I just kept screwing that lid on and trying to screw it on a different way and thinking I could do it, if I turned the bottle upside down, Yeah,
yes, I know. Well, because that's kind of what you learn to kind of operate like that in the moment. And again, when it goes back to when you don't have that self-worth or belief that you're worth a certain of anything, then you just keep trying to fix and adjust yourself rather than just facing what's actually going on. And it's hard. It's hard. The nervous system it's an interesting entity, and it takes a lot of chipping away and acknowledgement to even get that crack to where it is where you can deal with all those stuff. But it's very real.
But for me, the hope is that there's much more conversation around it.
Oh, absolutely.
Like in my 20s, it was a taboo. You didn't talk about that. My son, he's 19. And mental health, they wear it like a badge on their sleeve. Oh, what meds are you on?
No, it's so true. Who's your therapist? How many times do you go a month? Yes. If we said that, you couldn't talk about that. That wasn't allowed. And there was something really wrong with you. And I have quotes around that. If you had those conversations. So yeah. And that's why we're here today. We're talking about it. We're like, no more. These are things are happening to people and getting, you mentioned having a 19-year-old, I have 20-year-olds. Talk about them now. Set up, a framework for it now. Acknowledge it, name it, get on it. So you can have that peace and contentment now. You don't have to wait for it. So I think that's so important. How can we support ourselves and other women in living unapologetically? You do this by the virtue of how you live. You offer support, you offer wise words, you have an incredible, vulnerable book out there right now. Talking about these things, but talk to me about supporting yourself and other women in living unapologetically. Because also you and I came up in an environment where the patriarchy and busting through ceilings was very real and very, you taught, I understand you talk about, dealing with sexual harassment in the workplace. I had the same thing happen in my 20s, and that was very normal. Like it was kind of just a thing and everybody kind of dealt with it. And so anyway, I could ramble on about that forever, but talk to me about this living unapologetically yourself, which you do really well, and helping other women too.
I have to say, most of the time, I don't know I'm doing it. I've just been
nice.
I had early basic combat training to tell the truth. And even when I was telling the truth, I was encouraged to be honest and truthful. So I always have been. I've worked within the corporate setting twice. Once for International Creative Management, which is a large global talent agency. And the second time was for Fox. And I was like a square peg in a round hole. I could not figure it out. These people were like speaking an entirely different language than I was. And I just didn't know any differently. And when I had an opinion, I said it. And when I thought something was weird, I said it. And I didn't understand why you were staying there till 6:40 when you were done at 5:15. And why do you need to go to HR to talk to the, about a guy that's 2 offices away from you? It's not in the fabric of who I am. So I guess that's an attribute, Melissa, going in.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that an attribute that a lot of women in our generation didn't have naturally, unfortunately, for them, I think. But I think that really emboldens and informs how you can show up in a room, and the belief that you can say something and speak truth, and it can make a difference, but you got to keep at it and be willing to do it. But if you see other women doing it, that invites other women to come along that don't feel empowered to do it. Has that been your experience?
Oh, absolutely. I've been told multiple times I'm a change maker. I'm a leader. I don't really know most of the time what people are talking about. I get to know it a little more now that, the book is out and people are responding. But I think also we are living in old, outdated patriarchal systems. Mm-hmm. And I think you and I are lucky enough to have spoken up and paid attention, and we're able to step out of that matrix and create something that's totally anew.
Yeah, no, 100% agree. Absolutely. And with the hope that as people see us doing this, it'll encourage more to come along with us, no matter what your age is, whether you're 25 or 65, it's not too late to do this. You can do this at any time. And we want you to come along with us on that. Absolutely. The importance of setting and coming back to your why / your values and everything you do. I'm sure you get pulled a lot of different ways for what it is you want to be involved with. A lot of people want to hear from you, talk to you, learn from you. Talk to me about how you determine that and what system you use, value system and why system that helps kind of inform that.
Well, this has been a process because I am a super empath and I had to learn that about myself. I'm also highly intuitive, and that's only grown keener as I've stepped into my authenticity and as the frequency and the light on this planet has been accelerated. So I see truth and I see need much more differently now. So I pause now. I used to jump in hook, line, and sinker with both feet, had the lifesaver. I'll help you. I'll rescue you.
Yeah.
Until that was sort of drained out of me naturally. But I'm able now to stop and to take a breath and to really feel what it is that I want. I mean, just an example, a really dear friend. I have so much admiration and love and respect for her. Mm-hmm. She found a product that really worked for her and she wanted to spread the news, and it just wasn't for me. And she had the gathering, and she kept sending multiple texts. And I said, I love you. This just isn't the one for me. Which was completely new. Otherwise, I would have shown up at 6:30 and, grit my teeth and, eyes staring at all corners of the room and just, when can I get out?
Isn't that true? But I think we're kind of conditioned as women to do that. And it's through some trial and error and just listening to our intuition and trusting it. Like, nope, this one's not for me. But I can step aside gracefully. It doesn't have to be abrupt. It doesn't have to be, rude or anything. It can just be that simple statement. I think that's such an important thing too. How you show up in it when you communicate it is really valuable. Living out of your own expectations versus others. And I'm sure from where you were, as a child to where you are now, unraveling that, talking to me about that journey, because that expectations journey is a big one for women anyway. And then you throw in your background. So talk to me about expectations.
Yeah, there's been a lot of prison walls around that. There's been a lot of barbed wire turned inward. And that was also something that required a lot of sifting. And I did get professional help, and I was led to different teachers and different modalities. And also, just free form writing and meditating has helped. It felt safer to follow along, but it never fit. Even when I would try, I could carry it off for a little bit, but then it just didn't fit.
Yep.
And so finally I had to just surrender and say, you know what? It's not who I am. Even Melissa, bringing out the book I did, that's such a taboo topic. I mean, seriously.
It really is. It really is. Yeah. And I think to the expectation, I don't know about you if you've heard this a lot, but the expectation is when you've got these dynamics with family, oh, it's your family. Oh, blood is thicker than water. And all these different things to try to guilt you out of your healing or what was true for you. And the inability to kind of hold multiple truths. It is true that your parents came into this with their own issues that led to them being the way they were. And that has a story to it. That is true. And it is also true that caused a lot of damage and a lot of trauma. I mean, both things can be true. So I think even sometimes with family, we just tend to set aside culture. Tends to set aside this, you excuse things in family that you wouldn't excuse with other people and without the recognition and the taboo of calling it out and speaking truth to it is something that we're still getting used to and people still have trouble with.
That was a whole process.
Yeah.
Because you're right. Don't talk, don't tell. Don't feel were like the three caveats that I knew. But through my journey, and it was not instant. I think I went 3 years with no communication with my mother whatsoever. But I came around full circle to really have mercy and understanding and compassion. She was horribly abused as a child. My father was abused. He talks about his childhood like, it was yippee skippy. Oh my gosh. He was 7 years old going with his 5-year-old brother on a train alone from Philly down to the shore.
Wow.
The neglect. And so it's really helped me to come full circle and really say, I was meant to be right where I was in that family, right in the middle of the 5 kids with 2 parents doing the best they could. But boy, were they rattled with illness.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's just that holding a multiple truths really helps unravel what you need to do for yourself too. And you talk about when you were writing the book, your ability for the first time to kind of sit down and really ruminate and think rather than just go mode. Because you've been very successful, career-wise over the years. You've worked with some really high-profile people very successfully and very well. And so you and I talked about before we started recording, sometimes when you kind of lived in a hypervigilant state, it can serve you in certain areas. You know how to go after things. You know how to survive. You know how to, create something out of nothing because you've had to. You know how to serve and quote unquote save the people around you because that's a mode you grew up in, but you don't know how to sit with things and sit with feelings and sit with emotions and sit with what's necessary to really write this kind of a book and put this kind of work out into the world. So what was that like for you? Was it shocking, scary? Did it feel safe or did you have to work into that?
It took a long time to surrender to that process. I think in 2007, I had an Irish seer tell me, you have a book to write. It's going to help a lot of people. And I was like, let's shove that under the carpet, And then I had 2 intuitives tell me back to back, you have a book to write. And the third one told me you have 3 books to write. And I was like, oh crap, I better get on this before I have a whole library to write. But, I went at it like a bulldog producer because that's what I knew.
Sure.
And I sat for 15 minutes a day in front of the computer, whether I had something to write or not. And though it gave me the first pass at a manuscript, I didn't feel a connection to the material. It was important to piece my experience together, but I didn't really feel strongly about it. And then a wise mentor said, you know what? Why don't you take another pass through? And this time go from little Susie's point of view, that little one in your heart that has walked through all of this and has been through it all with you. And Melissa, it's not so much that the manuscript changed, not the black and white, but my connection to it. And I think it was in galley form. The publisher sent it to me and it was the final pass. It was the final read. And I got through chapter 12, which is the story of me leaving my marriage and what that process entailed. And at the end of the chapter, I was like, holy cow, that woman is strong. And then I went, oh, that's you.
Oh, wow. Isn't that so interesting how we disconnect ourselves from our story sometimes? But if somebody were to describe you to you, you'd think that was another person and you would just be like, oh, they're amazing. Can I talk to them? Like you are them. You are living that. So, and when you continually have people, I've had people in different ways come up over the years. You need to tell your story. You need to write something. You need to say something. Close friends, people that knew my story. One close friend in particular, we've been friends. She's on season 1 of the podcast. My friend Kristen Miller started telling me early on. We've been friends since we were 9, 10 years old. Still very close today. She's like kind of fed that to me over the years. And so when I started the podcast, she was like, finally. but you have to see it in yourself, I think, before you can really do the authentic work. And I think that's true of anything you go after. Until you can see it in yourself, and also connecting with that inner child. I cannot talk to people enough about taking, if you're having some struggles in these areas and things that you need to peel back, you need connecting and doing the inner child work. Can be really, really healing and informative, and create a kind of a different lens of how you see yourself in the journey, and understanding, sometimes even forgive yourself for decisions and choices you made at that time, but then stepping back and looking at the space you were in and going, dang, I mean, all things considered, that's pretty remarkable that they were able to piece that together. So thank you for sharing that and your vulnerability with that. Accepting the layered aspects of ourselves. This is a really, I think, tricky one for people. We like the shiny things. We like to talk about the things that look pretty on paper and on Instagram and social media and present well in conversations and whatnot. But it's all that other stuff, all the layers that make us who we are today, that really, until I think, and I'm still working on this, until you, again, can accept all those pieces, it's very difficult to not only love yourself well, but to love other people well as also. So talk to me about layers and your journey with that.
So I think for me, examining the layers and teasing them out has really led to an authentic place of accepting myself and building an authentic place of compassion. And it leads me to be authentically who I am. I didn't know who I was. I was a chameleon. It was a survival technique. I was who I thought you wanted me to be. And I still catch myself. Like I'll take on the tone and the temperament of who I'm with and relate to them in a way that I feel may be conducive to who they are. But it's taken me a while to stop down and really work it through and look at it and say, this is what I believe. This is who I am. This is my experience. This is what I've discovered. And those layers are actually something that I now look forward to embracing. I used to want to shove it away, right? Or, let me just go out and run another 10K. I don't really want to explore that. Thank you. Or, let me go work out at the pool and then go to kettlebells and hot yoga. And I'll get back to you on that, because then I'll be anesthetized. But to really wake up and say, oh, wow, here's what I have in front of me to explore. Let me look at this, because there's going to be shiny tidbits of precious metal in here.
Yeah. And you find the diamonds in the rough and the pearls and all of those things. But I think when you, I think for so many times, I think especially in our generation, we confused escapism for dealing with things when really, we go run all these miles or do all these physical exertions, these hot yoga, all this stuff. And yes, it's a physical release, but then we thought we were done with it. And we talked a little bit about that earlier, but it's till you are really able to feel and peel back those layers. You can get a temporary calm because you just wore yourself out from kind of releasing all that, but it's temporary. It doesn't stay with you. Whereas when you start peeling back the layers and accepting them for what they are and learning from them and calling them what they are. I mean, I don't believe there's such a thing as a good or bad emotion. And we really like to put labels on emotions. They're emotions. They're informers. But because of the taboos that put on them, we like to stuff some more than others. And they are uncomfortable, but they're informers and clues. And that goes with the layers journey too, and being willing to do that and being willing to step away from the escapism to true like embodiment and presence and mindfulness. I think those are things that you have done and continue to do and allow you to get to this place in the journey where you can be in this space with yourself. Would you say that's true?
Oh my gosh. And it's such a beautiful place. Like I didn't realize how much I was longing for this. I remember when I first got clean and people were talking about serenity and I didn't have any idea what they were what is serenity and why do I even want that? Why is that even important to me? Do you not understand what I have to do to pay my rent at the beginning of next month? Like, don't talk to me about serenity, but there's an authenticity, a natural authenticity that comes, and it's such a place of soothing. If we would have done this interview even 3 years ago, Melissa, my tempo would have been times 10. I would not have been breathing. I would not be able to let you finish your sentence. I would have been jumping right in there.
Yeah, no, and I think that's something I still work on too. I mean, one of the best things about doing a podcast is when you go back and listen, because I totally relate to that. My mind is just running. I am ready with an answer. Sometimes it's out of excitement and sometimes it's out of making sure my voice is heard. Because when you come up in an environment where you're told your voice isn't of value or it is not to be heard, then you kind of are just ready. So I completely relate to that. And I go back, and that's one of the things I'm like, I need to just slow down and take in the words and listen to the conversation. I'm going to be such a better participant, not only in this work, but in my relationships and for myself if I learn to do that. But isn't that true? It just takes time. I mean, you really have to retrain yourself and retrain your system on how to operate and think. At least that's been my story.
Well, and it's also surrendering to the idea that you actually matter.
Mm-hmm.
You have worth, you have value, you have meaning. You're here on this earth for a very important reason, or believe me, you would not be here.
Yeah. And there's your takeaway, folks. If you don't take away anything else from this today, that was so beautifully put. And that is so true. And if you're not feeling that way, it is worth every amount of your time to take the journey to get there because it will make a difference. It matters. It just matters. So thank you for that. That was such a beautiful nugget. All right. In summary, in living out feel, finding empowerment and embracing layers, talk to me about how this has affected your relationship with yourself as well as your relationship with others.
I'm a different person. I am in my being now. I am in the fabric of my being and I can go anywhere and be there. The other thing that it's affected is true compassion. I used to come off the exit ramp on the freeway in LA and just ignore that person begging. And then one day I came down that freeway and it was an entirely different experience. And I opened my wallet, whatever came out. If it was 20, that was what it was. If it was 100, that's what it was. And I looked in their eyes and I said, you matter, because that has been my journey coming full circle. And now I'm able to share that. with
Yeah.
others.
I think it's that whole humanity piece. When you can see yourself and your humanity, it opens the door to see other people's humanity. And with all of our cracks and crags and stories and beauty, because it's all part of that journey. But until you can see that in yourself, I think it's really hard to see it or take the time to see it, because it can be scary. It can be scary to face all that, but so worth it. Thank you for sharing that. All right, we are down to our rapid fire. Name 5 activities that nourish you.
Walking barefoot on the earth, breathing and noticing I am breathing, bike rides and noticing my surroundings, having a conversation where I'm actually present, not where I'm thinking what the next answer is going to be or how many loads of laundry I have to take off the line and fold.
Is that so true? It sounds simple, but it's true.
And kombucha, drinking a fun flavor of kombucha.
Yep.
And realizing it.
Yeah, absolutely. That presence and being in the moment is such a powerful thing. And we don't realize how ragged we're running ourselves until we finally start doing it. And and nature, I feel you. Nature is such my happiest places are on a mountain lake or at the ocean. Everything just kind of, I just soothe that in and breathe that in. But it's the stopping breathing thing. That's a big thing too, is like we get so focused. And I started doing a thing a couple of years ago. Someone that I was working with at the time said, set a timer and stop once an hour to do this breathing exercise. And because you're not breathing, regularly, because you're just go, 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 go. And that, I was like, oh my gosh. That was like, so sometimes it's just these simple things that are so, that make such a difference. And you live in a place now where you can do that too so well. And that makes a difference too in just your surrounding and in your environment. 5 words on how you want to feel the next 6 months.
Grounded, peaceful, important, connected, and at peace.
Yeah. Oh, Susan, this has been so great. It's just been so wonderful connecting with you. I feel like I've found a kindred spirit in just journey and how you're going about this in the work you're doing. Tell us the name of your book and where we can find it.
The book is called Toxic Family: Transforming Childhood Trauma into Adult Freedom.
Okay.
And you can find it at all the usual places, Amazon, Barnes & Noble.
Okay.
And then people can find me at susangold.us.
Okay. And people, this will be in our sources document. We will share this on social media as we're promoting this episode. So go to embracinglayers.com. You'll be able to find all these resources. So don't worry if you don't have a pen and paper right now. But I wanted to give her an opportunity to share that. But thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for your work in the world and your willingness to share that and willingness to help other people feel empowered to do that as well. Really, really
And Melissa, thank you to you. It takes time. It takes energy. It takes creativity. It takes money. It takes resources to produce a podcast. And most of them only last 6 episodes. So you're beyond the pale. So thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's my pleasure. And I get to meet people like you and share you with the world. Such a joy. So Field Podcast audience, again, go to embracinglayers.com to find out how you can learn more about Susan and her journey and learn from her. And if these are resources that you need, start that journey. And if you have questions for us, let us know. We want to support you in that, embracinglayers@gmail.com. But thanks so much for being with us today and have a great week.